Hello, everybody. Welcome to this contemplation on the Capricorn full moon. I say contemplation very specifically. I mean that because one of the beautiful things that I personally have been downloading through the last full moon we had, which would have been the Sagittarius full moon, and then the Gemini new moon, which was just a little bit ago on June 17th. I'm doing this on June 23rd. So we're just, not even a week past the Gemini new moon. And what I've been uncovering is that every single answer that we need, oh gosh, that's too strong a statement. Almost all, almost all of the answers that we need are inside of ourselves and are being served up to us by our intuition. And the best that really anybody can do for somebody else is to open up a space where possibly you get to have a different look at something, or like you see from a different angle because that's their perspective. And now, given their perspective and that new information, maybe things look different from where you stand, but that's ultimately up to you. And I think, calling this a contemplation and just making that super clear feels really good as a way of kind of like setting the containers, setting the boundaries in this space. I mean, the live stream, I also mean the channel Owning Authenticity in general, um, setting that container to specifically allow and make completely transparent that each individual person in this space is holding their own power. So, this is not an energy reading. This is my own personal contemplation based on my lived experience and my experience with these energies and what I can feel active in the right now. So, June 23rd, 2023. And at the same time, while I don't have any of your answers, basically, is what I'm saying, I only have answers that will serve me. I do think that when we listen to other people talk about their experience and talk about their perspective, that there can absolutely be little nuggets of gold that you can pull out for your own personal work inside yourself, your real work, the work that's between you and you. And so this, I want to be really intentional about what these live streams and really anything on my channel, what it is. It's one person's contemplation, one person, one student in the field sharing their notes and what's going on for them. And if that helps anybody else get a little bit clearer about what's going on for you and what you're feeling, it likely is not going to be identical to the way that I'm experiencing these energies, but that doesn't mean that it might not still clarify. Some of the most clarifying teachers that I have tell me things that I am exactly opposed to. And in the opposition with what they're saying, I get really clear on my side. So this is also where I draw my inspiration from in telling my story, because I think I personally have a really rich relationship with getting to hear other people's stories and getting to use my imagination to kind of project myself into those situations like a fantasy almost, and then kind of lucid dream my way through it as far as, what would I do in that situation, in those circumstances, up against those challenges, what would I do? And I find it very helpful to get to hear from other people what they're going through and how they're experiencing it. Hello, Deb from Ontario, Canada. So great to have you with us. Um, yeah, so this is my contemplation, and I'm excited to share it with you. I am always excited to share pretty much anything. It's pretty much how I'm wired. It's a big part of who I am, that as I go through my life experience, one, every single experience I have gives me what feels like a whole chunk of inner processing that needs to happen. And then once I do process it and the dust settles, there's a mechanism in my energy that says, okay, now share this. Now share the story of, what you harvested, what you learned from this experience, share that story. And so that's what I do. I have an experience, I process it and I share it. And I have an experience and I process it and I share it. And I let it be that simple. It really does make life easier on me. And I say all of this as my lead in for the Capricorn full moon contemplation. If you've been following these lunar updates, you know that we're in a funky, disjointed phase of the lunar cycle, which does come around every year and a half, and it lasts about a year and a half. And what this is where we have like the new moon of this lunar cycle is in Gemini. And instead of the full moon being in Gemini's sister sign, Sagittarius, the full moon is on into Capricorn. And so then after the Capricorn full moon, then we have the Cancer new moon. And the beginning of that lunar cycle happens in Cancer, but then the height of it is going to happen in Aquarius, which has very little to do with Cancer, just like Capricorn has very little to do with Gemini. So this is where I'm going to tie back to, what have you been learning? What information has come up through your intuition? Like, what are you being served to contemplate within yourself? That Sagittarius full moon, which was the last full moon we had around early June, that would have been illuminating, right? The moon being conjunct the earth, exactly opposite the sun. That would have been illuminating our personal belief structure, our beliefs about the world and how life works and who we are and what our function and purpose and, what is this that we're doing here? Like, basically, Sagittarius is our framework for understanding the life that we're living. And that's why I say, like, my heavy Sagittarius energy, every single time I have a life experience, there's a gigantic amount of processing then that has to go on in my Sagittarius, and to be able to comprehend and understand and digest what it is that I went through. What does that mean? Does it change anything? Like, yesterday I had an experience where I walked away from a situation and I felt like somebody didn't like me. And it was a really, really long day and I was already tired by that point. But as I was journaling about it in the evening, basically my expanded self asked me the question, like, what if she doesn't like you? Like, let's say that's true. Does that mean anything? Does that change anything? Does that make you want to approach anything differently? What does it mean that she doesn't like you? Like, don't just stop at the fact of, oh, this person doesn't like me. One, we don't even know if that's true. This is only one person's interpretation. And two, what if it's not? What if it's not true and you're kind of going through all of this in your head? And number three, even if it is true, what does it matter? What does it actually mean? And so I got to see, like, wow, like, if she doesn't like me and she doesn't want to participate in the thing we were talking about, like, life goes on, kind of, that this Taurus North Node cycle, Scorpio South Node cycle that we're on the tail end of. We have like mid July is when the nodes are switching into Aries and Libra. And I'll do a little plug for my giant deep dive, my 7-hour deep dive that I made on this transit, the Aries North Node transit. It really captured my interest. So we have 7 hours of content so far on this transit. Do check it out. I'll link it in the description box after this is over. But the end of this Taurus North Node cycle is kind of this culmination of, like, you are holding your power. Like, it's inside of you. It's not out there. It's not with anybody else. It's with you. It's with me. I have my power. And so, given that I have my power, this person doesn't like me. Okay, so what? so what? Like, do you want to do anything differently with your power? And I got to the bottom of that and I'm like, not really. You know, some people aren't going to like it. Like, that makes sense. It's not for everybody. And that, like, processing the experience, like having the Sagittarius part where you process what you've been through and you decide what it means to you, that has been a huge chunk of what I've been going through. As far as like, the ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. And when we look at what Saturn's doing, Saturn entered Pisces in March of this year and has been moving up to about 7 degrees, I think, of Pisces. So like March to June, we've had this beginning chapter of Saturn in Pisces, which will be about a 2.5 year transit. And it just stationed retrograde, Saturn did, at 7 degrees of Pisces on June 17th, I believe. It was the same day as the Gemini new moon. And so retrogrades are all about reevaluating, kind of rehashing and recalculating and like going back over what has happened so far. And that is where I've had, okay, so like I've had a lot of these clicking into place things about, basically the bottom line is you get to decide what you want. Okay, so you're holding your power. You know what, you know, these things mean. You're not a puppet on anybody's strings. You're not hustling for your worthiness like we were before the Taurus North Node transit a year and a half ago. And maybe we're not all the way there. Are we ever all the way there? I think not. But we definitely are in a much more secure place than maybe ever before. And so this is where I'm at in my contemplations. And then things start presenting themselves to me, like Saturn in Pisces stationing retrograde on the 17th. A couple days later, I had something kind of like fall out of my life, something that like I thought I was going to work on for the next 2 years. That was like my understanding of like, here's what's going to unfold. And then I get an email on the 19th that basically says like, cancel that, like cancel this 2 year plan, delete it. It's not happening. It's not a thing. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, look at my, like, I had this whole thing, like, covering the next 2 years. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And then for that thing to, like, fall out of my life, I'm, like, looking around, like, look at all this open space, you know? But the interesting thing, this is how life supports us, I think, how the universe supports us, is, like, the interesting thing about that is on the 17th, on the Gemini new moon, the new information that I downloaded was, I don't want to do that 2 year thing. You know, like when I'm really honest about it, like I really don't want to. Like when I think about, when I process, why am I doing this? You know, like what's my motivation here? What's driving me to make this decision? It was a security thing. It was like that's a job for the next 2 years and an income stream for the next 2 years. And I'm a contract employee. I like that. I like the flexibility and the changing jobs a lot. And so it works for me, but then you have to find a contract like every time your contract is up. And I'm in one of those phases where my current contract is over in August. And so this was like, okay, here's the next 2 years of what I'm going to do. And then I find out, like through somebody else's deciding, like cancel that. But 2 days before, I had this epiphany, like, I don't even want to do this. You know, like the only reason I'm doing it is for money. And is that really my value system? Is that I'm going to like do something that I don't want to do just because I'm going to trade myself for money? That's starting to sound like the prostitute archetype, you know, where like I'm having to negotiate and trade just so I can have the power to survive. Ugh, is that what I want? And I had decided no. So now I'm at a point where one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to cancel the arrangement or I'm going to have to cancel the arrangement. And I thought many times, like in that span of time, those couple days in between deciding I don't want to do this and then receiving their email, like I considered many times like writing it out and being the one to send the email and cancel the thing and to take that action. And I never ended up doing that. I was like, no, I'm just going to wait and see what happens because because it was like really overwhelming to think about what would I say and how would I say, like, I don't want to do this, like it just didn't feel like a really easy path. It felt way easier to just like let it ride and just see what happens, cross that bridge when you get to it kind of thing. The heck is that? Oh, I think somebody's refilling the water softener. Anyways, um, yeah, so I let it ride, and then I get this email that they're canceling the thing. And I was like, oh my God. For one thing, that's the easier path, is that they wrote out the cancellation, right? Like I didn't have to do it. And number two, I got what I wanted. And number three, I only decided that I wanted that like 2 days before here they come with the cancellation. And it was like all on this Gemini new moon, Saturn turning retrograde, like on that June 16th and 17th, like I have this epiphany of like, I don't want this. And then 2, 3 days later, they're like, we don't want this either. So I'm like, okay, all right. Well, and I play it out like, how would I have felt if I hadn't been brought to that conclusion, like on my own? How would it have felt if I wanted like full steam ahead? Like if I still was like, this is my 2 years, this is what I'm going to do. This is, I'm like living it already. Um, if I had been in that mode and they had come back and canceled it, like that would have stung hard. And honestly, this is the crazy friggin' part. And this is why our healing journey is so fascinating because, like, we so rarely get the result out of a situation that we thought we were going to get. Like, when I don't want in this thing. I want to cancel the 2 year thing. And then they cancel the 2 year thing for me, which gives me this awesome out where it's effortless. I don't have to do anything. It still hurt my feelings. What? What? I still felt rejected. I still felt like I'm not good enough and they don't think I'm worth anything and like they don't think my work is of value and like I had all of these stories still and I had to keep reminding myself this is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. And it still hurt my feelings that they canceled the thing even though I wanted the cancellation. Oh my gosh, how about that? Deb says, I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm not going to send the email either. Monday's the call. I have also put it into the funds of the hands of the universe, maybe. Um, yeah, yeah. I like let it ride a little bit. Saturn retrograde in general is about reversals and like removals. I want to talk a lot more about Saturn. I freaking love Saturn. But in general, I did a video a while back on my Saturn return. I'm going to link that one down there too. It was one of the most fun videos I've ever made because my Saturn return was like literally the most magical time of my life that I've ever had. And I love shouting that from the rooftops. And this video is full of all of the magical turning points that were so lined up with Saturn stationing retrograde and Saturn stationing direct. Like, I think the most like auspicious example was obviously back at the time of my Saturn return, I didn't know about astrology yet, so I didn't even know I was living my Saturn return. I just knew one day that I have to cancel my wedding. I have to cancel my wedding. I'm engaged and I'm supposed to get married in 6 weeks and I can't do this. I have to cancel my wedding. And I did. I lived that life of like, I didn't get married. I did this path instead, and it completely changed my life. If you're interested, the story time is really fun. Lots of pictures. But as I tracked it back, I think it was like August 2nd, 2015, Saturn stationed direct. And on August 3rd, 2015 was when I downloaded the message. And it was actually a voice that I heard in my head that said, you have to cancel the wedding. And so that was like a whole thing. And so, yeah, Saturn stationing direct, Saturn stationing retrograde, like both of those turning points are very, very powerful, like pivotal, life altering turning points. And so, just like this, just like deciding that's not how I want to spend my next 2 years, like, yes, it is 2 years and that's a long time. But at this point, what I'm doing instead could be just like that, of deciding I don't want to get married. I want to, I want to be free, essentially, was all I really knew. I didn't know, like, I had to face the hardest part of canceling my wedding was having to face the fear that what if nobody else ever wants you ever? And I had to weigh that out. Like, on one hand, nobody else is ever going to want you, or you can marry this guy he's willing to marry you. He has a nice job. He, on paper, this is great. And which option are you going to choose? And I chose that maybe nobody will ever want me again, and I would rather have that. And so this kind of feels like that, like where I don't have a better option lined up. I just know it's not that. And so recognizing it's not that, that's one of the questions that I want to pose to myself and to everybody is like, what is your intuition telling you not that? Anything but that. We'll take worst case scenario over that. What is that? And for everybody, that's going to be totally different. But this is a time of letting go and letting the things that really don't serve your work in this world. Like, when I say work, I mean the reason you came. I mean your soul level mission of like, why did you need to incarnate on this earth at this time? Why did you take this body? Why did you take this character? What was your plan for it? And that is our work. And when there are things in our life that are standing in the way of us living that, they're taking up precious time and energy and attention away from our work. Saturn stationing retrograde, Saturn stationing direct will create turning points where things will physically be removed. A lot of times, whether you like it or not, it's like not at your control. And that's where, again, I go back to like, it was like a voice that told me, you have to cancel your wedding. I'm like, who was that? Who's talking to me? But like, I knew it was true. My whole body knew it was true, like in the instant that they told me. But yeah, so like deciding within yourself. And I want to speak to just a little bit of like, when you want something and you feel like I don't have a good enough reason for wanting it, like me with this is my job for the next 2 years. And it's not like I have this other contract that wants to pay me, or this one, it's like I'm making this choice between these two offers. No, I'm making a choice between this job for 2 years or unemployment. At the time, right? I thought we were still all of this was gonna unfold. I didn't know yet that they were canceling the thing. But in that deciding, I just like really started thinking like, is that how you want to spend your time? Saturn, Chronos, is the lord of time, or the time lord, or however you want to say that. There's another video, not my video, but an awesome one, that is an astrologer who I think mostly specifically studies Saturn. She's talking about like the mythos of Saturn and kind of what it represents in our lives, in our world. And so she talks a lot about how Saturn is like this timekeeper, and how the earth is, she uses this box analogy where like Saturn is also the lord of karma. So like in this box, that's what the earth is this physical container where, as you take your intention and your will, and like it's a ball, and you throw it out into the world, Saturn, karma, is the box that the ball hits and then bounces back in your direction. That's what Saturn is. So like Saturn retrograde and Saturn stationing direct, another word that is often, in the contemplation is consequences. And I want to just kind of unpack that just a little bit, because consequences in our culture has a very negative connotation, but in my mind, it does not at all. It's a beautiful thing, consequences. When you throw the ball, it comes back at you. And that's not a like, oh God, I need to be scared about the consequences. It's like, what kind of balls are you throwing? You know, like if you know it's gonna come back to you, if you know that, this is the earth, this is the 3D realm, the whole point is that karma exists here. And meaning the box is there, the parameters are there where your actions, the reactions actually come back to you just as much as anybody else who might be affected by them. And actually, in the Aries North Node deep dive, something that we get into, and I'll pull this in here since the nodes are changing just shortly after this Capricorn full moon. But one of the pieces was non-transferable consequences. So like, no matter whose idea, no matter whose influence caused you to do what you did, you got somebody over here that's like, hey, throw that ball at that way over there. And you're like, really? Throw the ball? And they're like, yeah, totally, throw it. You're like, okay. And so you throw it, and then it beams you in the face. Good consequence, bad consequence, doesn't matter. It's going to hit you. And then, like, let's say it's a bad consequence, and like, you are now getting arrested, and you want to say like, no, but she told me to throw the ball. She said that I should do it. And the law's like, I don't care. You threw the ball. This is your consequence. So that's on that side. But let's say it's a good consequence that comes right back to you. And then that person over there is like, well, I told you to do it, so you should give it to me. No, I'm the one that did it. If that person wanted the consequence, they should have thrown the ball themselves. The consequences of your actions are yours. They belong to you. They're like one of the best assets that you will ever have. Like your, what would it be called? Like the metaphorical pot of gold at the end of the rainbow are your consequences. Like all the harvest of all the seeds that you've ever sown. That's what comes to us during Saturn retrograde, are our consequences, our harvests, the fruits coming back to us for what we did. That's exciting, isn't it? Like, I don't understand why it's a negative thing. I love the idea of consequences, but I'll say I also have Saturn featured really prominently in my chart. I have Saturn and Uranus exactly conjunct at 29 degrees Sag. And then I also have my Sun and Chiron exactly, not conjunct by 1 degree at 28, 29 Gemini. So like those are in this really tight opposition where the Sun and Chiron and Saturn and Uranus, it's kind of like one hunk of energy. And so Saturn and I like this. It's like part of my identity that I just have always understood the box, basically. Like I understand how rapidly the karma comes back to you. And actually, I was listening to this other video on Esoteric Skies channel. Love him, love his intuition, beautiful transmissions. But this was a few years ago, he did a video talking through all of the moon signs. And when he was talking about the Leo moon, he explained, and this was something I had never heard or thought about before, but he explained how it's a very karmic moon. So like the repercussions of your actions, they're like almost instantaneous karma. And I have a Leo moon. And so anyways, that plus my Saturn in fire opposite my Sun, like I feel like I've always really understood the box. And I haven't always, like I think about 7th grade where I got bullied for a year. Dude, I'm going to tell you right now, don't be giving me any sympathy, because I threw that ball and it came back to me. And it was so much worse. Like consequences, like, I think about consequences, karma. It's equal, it's cause and effect. And the ball I threw and the ball that came back to me, I was just about to say, like, the consequences were massive. And for the first time, I just realized that, like, no, the harm, that I caused with the ball that I threw was massive. And the harm that I manifested in return was the same size as the damage I did. Damn, I'm gonna have to sit with that. Yeah. But especially like, you know, there's at 12 years old where, dude, that ball came back fast, and it was rough. It was really rough to live with the treatment that I had given out. You know, like I could dish it, but I sure couldn't take it. And I think that's a lot of people, you know, in the world, where sending out all kinds of things out into the world and like just launching rockets and saying things and throwing balls, and nobody like thinks it's going to come back. Saturn retrograde is a time where it does come back, and once you get the hang of the ball comes back to you, then it starts to be like really exhilarating. Like, what are you throwing out there? You know, like what are you using your life force and your personal will to create in the world? Because it'll come back. So if you're sending good things out into the world, if you're loving people, not in a fake, I have to be all light and love and spirituality or whatever, but like really doing whatever your best looks like to honor yourself and other people, like that's beautiful. And just even spending the energy to do that, it does come back to you with the world and the people around you honoring you. So the things that we spend our time doing, the things that we devote our energy towards, this Capricorn full moon is a beautiful time to ask ourselves, do we like the seeds that we're sowing? Do we like what we're planting in our garden? You know, like the fruit that we get comes off the seeds that we planted. So if we don't like the fruit we're getting, then plant different seeds. But we plant the seeds that we know how to plant while we know how to plant them, right? But this time, you know, coming off of the Sagittarius full moon, the Gemini new moon, we have new information. We have new information about life and who we are in the middle of this life, and what is this life for, and how much power do I have to affect what my life is. And I think a lot of us are discovering that we have more power than we were previously giving ourselves credit for. And given that you have all this power, what do you want to do with it? And even just as importantly, what don't you want to do with it? You know, like I don't want to give it to people who take it for granted. I don't want to give my energy away for, you know, low impact / no impact / you know, you basically watering a dead plant. You know, like it's really important that we value our time accordingly. Again, Saturn being the time lord, and time being our most true currency in this particular earth realm. Our time, how we spend our time, is how we're sowing these seeds into our life, and that is the harvest that eventually comes back to us again in time. And so, yeah, what are we spending our energy on? What don't we want to spend our energy on? And how has this new information changed all of that? You know, I want to, hello, welcome. I want to talk a little bit, and this is, I'm going to have a trigger warning here that I'm going to get into some sexual shame topics. This is the new information that has come up for me. And I'm not going to tell like an in-depth version of this, but the going into these last few months of like Saturn and Pisces, and kind of this beginning of this 2.5-year process, the information that has surfaced for me has been around some experiences that I had in my childhood where I was scolded and, you know, punished for exploring my sexuality at a very young age. And by sexuality, I mostly mean my body, right? Like I have a body and I'm new here and I'd like to see, like, what does it come with, you know? And yeah, so I was a very curious kid and very exploring my body, and that triggered my parents. And there were several instances where their fear of, like, what did this curiosity mean, their fear around it caused them to, like, lash out and tell me that I shouldn't be doing that. You know, like, this is wrong, this is bad, don't do that, like, just trying to separate me from me. Right? No, this is just me. But trying to make me fit into a space that kept them comfortable. And those experiences, like, several of them happened, I mean, before I was 7 years old. um, and how they say, like, our first 7 years, our brain is really developing, our sense of self, our identity, our ego is developing. And so, you know, when I'm 2, when I'm 4, when I'm 5, when I'm 6, like, I'm having these experiences that's teaching me that something that they want me to stop, but I can't stop because it's just who I am, that it is bad and disgusting. And the framework, the identity, the ego that I developed, the belief, Sagittarius, the belief about myself that I developed is that I'm bad. I'm a monster. World's worst monster. That's what I decided about myself, thanks to, in large part, a lot of these experiences. And before I go further, I also want to completely own that I chose my parents. I chose them on purpose. Like, I came through the exact path that I meant to come through. So I'm not a victim in any of this. I am very clear on that. But it is interesting how, you know, these experiences really repressed such a huge chunk of who I was, who I am, who I can't help but be because this is just who I am. Um, so all of that got, like, shoved into my shadow. So painful to go into those topics because those topics are now associated with me getting in trouble, with me being disgusting in the eyes of my parents, and kind of, like, pushed away at arm's length because, ew, gross, you know? And all of that seeped into my little teeny brain, and I downloaded the message, I'm bad. And that was one of the foundations of myself, was I am bad. And at the beginning of this year, I started working with a new life coach. She's on YouTube. Her channel is called Galactic Mystic. She is amazing. um, I started working with a new life coach, and one of the very first, I think the first session that we had together was, I told her, I'm fascinated by cult leaders. I'm just fascinated. Like, how do these people do what they do? How do they, like, live with what they do? I just don't understand it. And so it, like, fascinates me. And I was telling her how, like, I felt ashamed that, like, this is what I'm fascinated by. And that led into this whole conversation about, like, I'm bad and this is just one of the elements of, like, my dark side or whatever. And she gave me the bit of wisdom that rocked my world and opened me up over these last several months. She told me, you're not bad. You're not bad. And that sounds so simple, but let me tell you, like, it was pretty revolutionary because it was so clear that she believed it. And we got into this whole conversation around how essentially good and bad isn't real in nature. It just doesn't exist. It's like an illusion that humans are trying to make sense of things, and so we put some things in a good category and put some things in a bad category. Usually pain goes in the bad category. Like, I mean, we have our reasons for calling things good and bad, but in nature there is no such thing. And she told me, you are not bad. And so I come back in the second session the next month, and I shared with her how powerfully transformative it was to take I'm not bad, this thing that felt true in my body in the moment, but very clearly contradicts my whole life of knowing I'm bad, knowing that I'm a monster deep down. And now here she is telling me I'm not. And I'm like, what do I do with that? Right. And the second session, I told her, I'm like, I'm really starting to get it. I'm not bad. Like, no, I'm good. I am good. I have a good heart. And like, I was telling her all of this, and she's like, can I add another layer for you to contemplate? I'm like, dude, go for it. I'm stoked and ready. What is it? She said, she like leans in real close and she's like, you don't have to be good. What? What? Like my way out of I'm not bad was to discover my own goodness, and I am good. And like I felt like I was like really like being able to hang on to that. And then she like comes back and she's like takes it away. She's like, you don't even have to be good. Because again, good, bad, it's not real in nature. That's not a thing. And up until our very most recent session, which was just the beginning of this week, she was telling me about the Indigenous teacher that she works with and how they were doing kind of a guided visualization, kind of a meta loving kindness type visualization. And for the first time, he actually used the words National Geographic. We're going to bring National Geographic into this meditation. So somewhere in our, meta perspective where we're loving, universally loving everything that is, somewhere out there, there's a cheetah taking down an antelope in order to feed her cubs. Somewhere out there, there is the predator preying on the prey in order to survive and to feed their family. That this violence, this murder, this taking life from another, not even that can really be bad, because that's how the cheetah survives. That's how the cheetah feeds her cubs. Like it's circle of life. There is no good or bad. And so this shift that she helped me create, like in those first few months of the year before Saturn entered Pisces, letting go of I'm bad, opening up to I think I might actually be good. I think maybe I'm a good one, to good and bad don't even exist, and nobody's a bad one and nobody's a good one. And that's where I was when Saturn entered Pisces and brought all of this to my surface, all of this, which as I look back on it now, a few months later, it's like, this is the root of I'm bad. This is why I thought that, was because my parents told me I was, and they believed it. God, did they believe it? They were convincing. And why would I have not believed them? They are my everything. Like, of course your parents can brainwash you. That's kind of the whole point of a 0 to 7-year-old brain, is that you're there as a sponge to absorb whatever your environment is. And so I say all of that because there's no shame in, like what is coming up and what is being shown to you, and what are the shifts that let it happen. What are the realizations and the openings that let you see more down into the roots? Because let me tell you what happened when I saw those roots. Like I hope I've done a good enough job. It is what it is, of painting this picture of I'm bad, because it guided my life. It had me hiding so much of myself. And yes, I've done a lot of putting myself out there, but I do so reluctantly. Like, I really hope, I want to do good, but I also don't want anybody else to discover the monster that I really am. And so I hope nobody looks too closely, because then they'll see that I really am a monster. Like, this was how I was thinking about myself, like into 2023. And it's all very subconscious. It's all very under the surface, and just kind of like behind the scenes, as our foundation of belief really usually is. It's not usually something that we spend a whole lot of time consciously thinking about until somebody offers us something like, you're not bad. And at that point, I had to admit that I'm bad is actually under everything that I am. It's kind of like the foundational layer of who I believe I am in this world. First, I'm bad. And second, I work really hard to make up for that. All my workaholic behavior, all my like overachiever behavior, my masking, my people pleasing, I work really hard to make up for how bad I am. That's what my life is. It's making up for the monster that I really am and hoping that nobody else will figure that out. And so these last few months of getting to see what's at the root, where did that belief come from? And it came from me exploring my natural curiosity, me exploring the body that I manifested to carry me through this world, the body that belongs to me. I wanted to explore it, and I had a natural curiosity, and that was triggering to the authority figures in my life, and their beliefs at the time, couldn't tell you what they would do now, you know, maybe something different, but their beliefs at the time was that this is disgusting. This is disgusting and hugely inappropriate, and you need to stop. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And in my little brain, I'm like, I can't stop. How do you not be who you are? Like, I don't know how to do that. So I just learned, like, okay, so this part of me is a secret. The monster part, the disgusting part, that's a secret. And so getting to see that they said I'm bad and that I'm, you know, disgusting and wrong and all these things, like, because I was touching my own little body. For that, I learned I was a monster. And when I got to pull all of that, I'm skipping over a lot of tears in the pulling of all of that up out of my subconscious. Every single one had to be felt in the pain of what it was to receive that rejection. But at the end of it, when I had all of it up out of my shadow and I could see this was their evidence and they convicted me as guilty of being bad over this evidence? Really? I don't believe it. I don't believe that those things make me bad. They don't. Me exploring my own body that belongs to me does not make me bad. Me having curiosity and questions and wondering what's going on around me, that does not make me bad. And so to get to see the evidence that I was convicted on so clearly, the foundation of my belief system of who I am in this life it's like when you pick up a house and you take it and you put it on a completely different tract of land, you know, like you take it off this address, this space on the earth, this basement underneath, this whatever it is, you take it and you pick it up and you move it 8 hours south on this completely different tract of land, this completely different basement, these other buildings all around it. Like, I mean, my literal foundation has been replaced, has been rewritten. The foundation of the belief of who I am is no longer I'm bad. I know I'm not. I know for a fact that I am not, because what I went through, I was exploring my natural essence, like my natural body, my natural energy. Like I was just doing what came naturally to me. And that doesn't make me bad. You know, I see how triggering it was for my parents. And that was a lot of the tears I cried as I brought all of this up out of my subconscious was, you know, what happened to them that they were so repressed, that my lack of repression was so triggering to them that I had to repress to be able to survive in that environment. You know, they didn't just become that. You know, I didn't just become repressed for no good reason. I was kind of traumatized into my repression. And so it really makes me wonder, you know, how did they get repressed? And then I go back in the line and I think, how did my grandparents get repressed? And then I go back in the line and I think, how did my great grandparents get repressed? You know, this chain of pain, this chain of repressing our own natural self and calling ourselves monsters for what is natural within us. How many of us are sitting on something like this? You know, like, I know in my ancestry, in my lineage, like, there is a serious sexual repression bonanza happening. Like, it's all around. It's everywhere in my family, both sides. And I can only imagine the pain and the trauma, the unhealed wounds that caused what happened to me, but really what caused, you know, what happened all the way up the chain. And I personally don't have kids right now. Maybe someday, but I am grateful to even get to ask myself a question like, you know, what would I do? What would I do if I was the parent? And knowing what I know now, knowing that I'm not bad, neither is anybody else, right? Like, we only can do what comes naturally to us unless you traumatize somebody into a different kind of response. But like, if I walked in on my little 4-year-old daughter masturbating to orgasm, what would I do? You know, what, like, literally, these are all the questions. Like, would I leave the room and like give her back her privacy? Would I ask her what she's doing? Would I have barged right in without knocking in the first place? I don't think I would, you know? Like, I don't think I would even be able to catch her masturbating, you know? Like, what if I gave her her privacy right off the bat and didn't intrude on it without asking for her permission? You know? Like, so many ways that as we heal within ourselves, we're able to make a different choice for what we want to be in the world going forward. We can't change what anybody else is. We can't change who they were back then when they did things to us. Like, we can't change any of that, but we can evolve into choosing something different through our own actions going forward, based on what we've been through, based on how we process our experiences, based on what kind of a legacy do we want to leave in the world. And it's been very clear to me these last couple of years of doing Owning Authenticity, this work of, I want to be one example of someone who is their authentic self, out loud, in public, in private. It's all the same. I want to integrate into the whole version of who I am, and I want to be that in as many different circumstances and scenarios as I possibly can. And nobody's perfect. I was just thinking last night, I have this event that I'm going to this afternoon that's like a professional thing. And I was like journaling about how I'm kind of tired. So I want to make sure that I really get grounded and like really like be present. And I'm like, why am I making this so important? Like, why is this moment any more important than like any other moment of my life? Like, I still have these impulses of these urges to like do extra good, you know, like be extra good today. And it's like, be you all day, every day. And that's enough. That's enough for you to just be you. And this urge to be better and like to be my best, that definitely is a holdout. It's a leftover from hiding the monster inside of me. And so this is where, again, I think, you know, what a winding road we've taken to get here. But this is where I will say, for the Capricorn full moon, this is a turning point in getting to decide, okay, so given what you now know, your leading edge version of who you know yourself to be, the power that you are holding, the healing that you have done, all of the amazing progress and chapters and blocks that you have already worked through. It's massive. Kudos, number one. And number two, now that you know all of that, what do you think of the structures that you have in your life? You know, where are you settling for things that match your old values but not your new values? You know, like my example of I was like full steam ahead going to do this job because it's a stream of income. Like I was still operating out of like needing my financial security as my first and foremost value, and enjoying my work and enjoying my life was under that. And so this like moment that I had on the Gemini new moon where I got to be like, no, enjoying my life is still number one. And if enjoying my life is number one, it doesn't even matter what's going on underneath that, because I don't want this job. I don't. And so, like, okay, so given what you know about yourself now, what are the structures that you have in your life? What are the structures that you want to build in your life? And what are the things that maybe you're ready to let go of? And that's a lot, right? And I want to add one piece here that is we absolutely don't have to have it all figured out ever. Okay? That's like not the point, but one little bit more towards your whole self, your authentic self, your centered in the divinity of your being self. One step closer to living that life. That's what this Capricorn full moon, I think, is going to help us to move in that direction. And that actually is a fun little note of like, okay, so Capricorn is very much about the mountain that you want to climb. Kind of the Capricorn's represented by the sea goat, and the sea goat is a creature that can climb the tallest mountain. It is also a creature, though, that can swim the deepest depth of the ocean. Like it can, basically saying it can traverse any terrain because it wants it bad enough. It wants to be at the top of the mountain. It wants whatever it is that it's diving for. And it will persevere through as many challenges and obstacles and steep parts, and you fell back down a big ways and you had to reclimb back up the thing. Like Capricorn will do it all because they want that energy, wants what's at the top of the mountain. And Capricorn alone doesn't necessarily decide what's at the top of the mountain. That's where, again, I go back to, you know, we've woven a lot of values talk into this contemplation, um, due in large part to the Jupiter and Taurus, Jupiter and North Node in Taurus. Um, it's like, what is most important to you? Because Capricorn can climb the mountain. Taurus is the one, though, that gets to say, which mountain are we going to climb? Which one of these mountains is most important to me to stand on the top of? So Taurus gets to point and say, that one right there. I want that peak. And so you do that with your values. You do that with what is most important to you. And if you want, I'll link in the description of the too. I have a values exercise. There's lots of them out there. You can Google values exercise and find lots of different examples where they'll help you contemplate lots of different elements and facets of life. And you can kind of work through what is the most important thing to you. I just did the exercise yesterday and narrowed it down to my top two values were authenticity and intuition. And so as I sit then with this Capricorn full moon question of what structures do you want in your life, I want to create a life that supports my authentic self. And I want to create a life that allows me to navigate using my intuition. And if a structure contradicts that, if the structure is like, nope, we need a set schedule, a set routine, No ifs, ands, or buts. That's what you got to do. I'm like, okay, you're fired. Like, you're obviously not the structure for me, because my authentic self is consistently inconsistent. And my intuition guides me like this. So that's what it is, you know? And the structures in my life have to be able to support that. And what I'm like, the way, like the very, 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 very practical way that this has worked out for me is that since the Gemini new moon and Saturn stationing retrograde, of deciding I don't want this version of this next 2 years of what I was planning to do. I don't want that. And at the same time, I was downloading this inspiration of like this path of like kind of go this way. And that's what I'm committing to, is for the next 6 months, I'm going to commit to once a week spending this many hours, basically like 5 hours a week, walking in that direction. 5 hours the next week, walking in that direction. 5 hours the next week, walking in that direction. For the next 6 months, that's what I'm going to do. And there's no guarantees, there's no promises that I'm ever going to make a penny going down this road, but it looks fun. It looks like my authentic self will fit there. It's coming, it's being born up out of my intuition. My intuition won't shut up about it. It's like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Go this way. So it aligns with my top two values. That's the only guarantee that I have, is that it fits me. It feels good. I feel good looking down this path. I feel like I am attracted to this path. I want to go there. When I looked down the original version of what I wanted for the next 2 years, I just was like, I'm so tired just even looking at that. This, I'm like excited, I'm inspired, I'm like having ideas. It's fun and it's energizing. And so that's the only guarantee that I have, is that this path feels good and this one didn't. You know, like, I think that's a big part of this energy, especially with Saturn in Pisces, is that the point of the mountain that you choose, Taurus, getting to say authenticity and intuition. Those are my values. That's the mountain that I'm going to climb. That's the path that I'm going to point myself towards. And then my Capricorn energy comes along and is like the consistent, devoted creator of that path, whatever it is. It's like the ability to get to the top of the mountain. So my Capricorn energy has made this commitment of every single week, I'm going to do this little chunk. And then next week, I'm going to do this little chunk. And then the week after, I'm going to do this little chunk. And 26 weeks from now, 6 months from now, I'm going to be somewhere. You know, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be. It's a mystery. And that's kind of the fun part. So I think that's a good place to leave this contemplation. I feel like it was all over the freaking place. I would love to know which part of it stood out for you, that like really rang your bell, like, oh yeah, I want that, or that's what's coming up in me, or that's the exact opposite of what I think is true. Whatever stoked your fires and clarified within you, God, would I love to hear that down below. It would just mean the world to me. If you don't feel called, dude, don't do it, right? The answer is inside of you, no matter what. And if you're also called to subscribe to the channel, to like this video, to share it out somewhere, you think somebody else might want to see it, all of those things mean so much to me when I see people nudging this work out into the world. And again, that's only if you feel called. I show up here because it feels good to me. I show up here and I do this and I spend time in this space because it aligns and it gives me room for my authenticity and my intuition. So that is why I'm here. And everything else that I receive from this space is truly the cherry on top. And so often there's all kinds of cherries on top that like you don't know are coming when you set out on the original path. You think that you're signing up to like, I want to get here. I want to like get to this destination. And then while you're walking along that destination, you find this turn and it's like, oh, what's that? That's really cool. And now you're over here landing somewhere where you never intended to be, but is beautiful all the same. And that is where I will leave you with this Capricorn full moon, is that you don't have to have every single detail figured out of what do you want to build in your life and what do you want your legacy to be, you can truly simplify and come to it from the Taurus energy space of what are your top values? What is most important to you? And begin there and begin by applying those values to the structures that you have in your life and see if you can identify candidates where you fit better and places where you fit not as well with your top values. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those places where you don't fit, they fall right out of your life. They just stop existing in your world. For better or for worse. Sometimes in the short term, it can be a little bumpy, but always in the long term, if something is in the way of your soul's work in the long run, I know for myself, I have always been grateful for those things that have fallen away. Like we thank God for unanswered prayers kind of thing. Uh, we end up where we need to be, even if we don't have the foresight and the conscious awareness to be able to plan how to get there. I hope this has been helpful. Again, I would love to hear from you down below. Please take a second to like the video, and I will see you next time. You take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Okay, bye.